This is the story of the shadow that stood by the grave. A military photographer was taking pictures at a funeral when he noticed something strange in the photo. In one of the images, there was a silhouette standing next to the freshly dug grave. When he looked back, there was no one there. He took more pictures at the site, and in another image, the same shadow appeared. But what was really weird was that the shadow matched the shape of a photo taken years ago of a soldier who had died in combat and whose funeral they were attending. The family saw the picture, and they believed the shadow was the soldier who had come to say goodbye. And now, their story is going viral. So let's talk about this story and all the details surrounding it. On September 28, 2007, Army Sergeant Matthew P. McClintock was killed in action in Iraq. A year later, his body was brought home and laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. It was a somber occasion for his family and friends, many of whom were still reeling from the loss. Among those present was a photographer named Ben Dross, who was there to capture the emotional moments of the burial. At some point during the ceremony, while photographing the proceedings, he snapped a shot of the headstone where the burial would take place. But when he reviewed the photo later, he noticed something strange. There appeared to be a dark shadow in the image. He assumed it was just a bird that had flown into the frame, so he didn't think much of it. However, 2 days later, he was looking through more of his photographs from the event when he came across another odd image. This time, the shadow was more prominent and seemed to match the shape of a person. He showed the pictures to Matthew's mother, and she told him that the shadow in the second photo looked just like her son. She explained that the first picture was taken at the gravesite before Matthew's coffin arrived, and the second picture was taken after the coffin had been placed on the ground, but before it was lowered into the grave. She asked Ben if he could zoom in on the headstone in the second photo, so she could see if the shadow appeared to have a cross-shaped outline, which would be in keeping with the military uniforms of the time. When Ben zoomed in, sure enough, the shadow seemed to show a distinct cross shape, just like the one worn by Matthew and other soldiers. At first, Ben thought it must have been some kind of trick of the light or a camera artifact, but then he remembered that the second picture had been taken shortly before the coffin was buried, whereas the first picture had been taken beforehand. If it was a shadow cast by a person, then that person had appeared and disappeared between the taking of the two photos. When Ben shared these photos with Matthew's mother, Helen Viola, she was deeply moved. She said, "We felt it was a sign. We knew it was Matt. He came to say goodbye." Since then, the story has spread widely among veteran groups and online military forums. Many people have come forward with their own experiences of seeing similar shadows or apparitions at funerals or gravesites. Some believe that these are the spirits of fallen soldiers who have come to pay their respects or say goodbye. Others believe that they are simply tricks of the light or imagination. One user on a popular forum wrote, "I am a combat veteran who has lost many friends in combat. While I do not doubt that many servicemen and women feel the need to pay their respects to fallen comrades, I have never seen anything of the sort. However, I am a firm believer in the power of the mind and suggestion. It's possible that those who believe they saw a fallen comrade may have subconsciously convinced themselves that they did." Another user added, "As a veteran myself, I can attest to the fact that we often see things that can't be explained away as simple tricks of the light or imagination. Combat is a very intense experience, and it can leave us with heightened senses and a strong desire to make sense of what we see. It's possible that the stress of combat can also cause us to imagine things that aren't really there." Others have suggested that these apparitions may be the result of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which is common among veterans. However, many people continue to report seeing these apparitions even years after their service has ended. This suggests that there may be more to these sightings than PTSD. Some believe that these apparitions are the spirits of fallen soldiers who have come to pay their respects or say goodbye. This belief is supported by the fact that many people report seeing apparitions of fallen soldiers around Memorial Day and Veterans Day, which are holidays dedicated to honoring those who have died in service to their country. Others believe that these apparitions are simply tricks of the light or imagination. Proponents of this view argue that the human brain is very powerful and can convince us that we are seeing things that aren't really there. They also point to the fact that many of these sightings occur during times of high stress, such as funerals or other emotionally charged occasions. So what do you think? Are these apparitions the spirits of fallen soldiers, or simply tricks of the light? Let me know in the comments below. Helen and her husband, along with several members of their family, visit Matthew's grave every week. They never expected the story to go viral, but since then, They have been contacted by dozens of strangers who say they, too, have seen similar apparitions at funerals or gravesites. In fact, the story of the shadow that stood by the grave has become so well known that a local artist named Tommy Kachigan was inspired to create a sculpture of it. The sculpture is a bronze statue of a soldier standing at a graveside. The shadow that stands by the grave is clearly visible behind the soldier. The statue has been displayed at several veteran events and is now on permanent display at a military museum. The museum is located in a small town about an hour's drive from Arlington National Cemetery. Every year, thousands of visitors come to the museum to see the statue and learn about Matthew's story. Many veterans say that the statue and the story of the shadow that stood by the grave reminds them of the sacrifices that soldiers make every day to protect our freedom. Others say it's a reminder of the bonds that unite soldiers and their families in both life and death. Veteran groups have even given the statue a name, the Final Presence. It has become a symbol of the strength and resilience of the military community in the face of tragedy. The story of the shadow that stood by the grave continues to spread. People from all over the world have heard the tale, and many have come to pay their respects at Matthew's grave. Some say they've even seen the shadow standing next to him, and so the mystery of the shadow that stood by the grave remains unsolved. Was it a trick of the light, a figment of someone's imagination, or something more? Perhaps it doesn't really matter. What matters most is the comfort that this story brings to those who have lost loved ones in war. Matthew's story is one of many that could have been featured in the exhibit, yet his story touched the hearts of the museum curators, and they decided to make it the centerpiece. They hope that visitors will leave the museum feeling inspired by the courage and sacrifice of soldiers like Matthew. The exhibit has been on display for several months now, and has been seen by tens of thousands of people. Many visitors have been moved to tears by the story of the shadow that stood by the grave. Others have come away feeling a renewed sense of patriotism and gratitude for the sacrifices that soldiers make every day to protect our freedom. And so the story of the shadow that stood by the grave continues to live on, bringing comfort and inspiration to those who hear it. A shadow, the silhouette of a man standing at a grave. It looks like something out of a scary movie, doesn't it? But this is real, and there's a sad story behind it. In 2008, a U.S. Army photographer was taking pictures at a funeral in Arlington National Cemetery. He snapped a few shots of the grave with the family and friends gathered around. Then he looked at the photos later and noticed something odd in one of them. There seemed to be a man standing at the grave. The thing was, no one was standing there when the picture was taken. That's because the photographer had unwittingly captured the shadow of a fallen soldier. But which soldier? He looked at the photos more closely and realized that the shape of the shadow matched the shape of an older photo of a man in uniform. That man was Army Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cash, who died in 2005 while serving in Iraq. He'd been covering his comrades as they tried to free hostages when they came under heavy fire. Cash was seriously wounded and died soon after. When the photographer showed the two images side by side to Casey's family, they immediately knew what it meant. They believed that the fallen soldier had come to say goodbye to his friends and family one last time. His sister Shamika told the Army Times, "As soon as I saw the picture, I knew it was my brother. It's just so comforting to know that he came to say goodbye to the people that loved him." The story spread quickly through military forums. At first, some people were skeptical, but then others started coming forward with their own stories about seeing similar shadows or silhouettes of fallen soldiers in their photographs. After the story was publicized, strangers began visiting Casey's grave every week to pay their respects. This touched the family, but it also burdened them. They didn't want people coming to the cemetery just because of a story they'd read online. Then, an artist named Justin Asaro took the photo and made a sculpture of the shadow standing at the grave. He called it the Final Presence. It was part of a larger piece called The Weight of War, which included other sculptures and a video. In 2012, a group of veterans called the Guardians of the Fallen asked if they could use the photos in an exhibit at the Eisenhower Museum in Washington, D.C. The exhibit was called The Shadow That Stood by the Grave. It included the story of how the photo was taken and the reaction it had caused. The veterans group said the exhibit was created to honor fallen service members and capture the enduring connection between the living and the dead. Did fallen Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cash really appear as a shadow in this photo? Maybe, maybe not. But whether it was a real apparition or just a trick of the light, the story behind this photo reminds us that those who serve in the military make the ultimate sacrifice. They put their lives on the line so that we can live in freedom. Now, it's time to hear from you. Do you believe in ghosts or the supernatural? Let me know in the comments. Also, please like and share this video if you think it's interesting. Thanks for watching.